And that we as African people must study the rules of organization. We must study the means of relating one to each other in such a way that we multiply our power. And we must study our enemy's organization such that we can probe that organization and destroy the power of the enemy. And we can do it. We have a tremendous amount of power in our hands. Right here in America, we are not a weak people by any stretch of the imagination. The only weakness is in our minds and in our imaginations. That's the only place. We are not a dependent people in the material sense, only in the psychological sense. The only thing, ladies and gentlemen, we must get over is our cowardice.
Family, anytime we talk about black power, or rather black empowerment, this has always been met with a lot of opposition, by the white supremacists. So guys, on today's video, we want to talk about black power, and to speak to us today is Dr. Amos Wilson. Dr. Amos Wilson is a psychologist and scholar. He has had a powerful perspective on black power. He saw it as a more than just a slogan or political movement. It was about black people developing a real power in economics, education, and culture to control their own destiny. Dr. Amos Wilson's vision of black power was about real power, control over resources, institutions, and the ability to shape the future of black people worldwide. He believed that without economic and psychological liberation, political power alone was meaningless. So guys, I want you to watch this video of Dr. Wilson trying to empower black folks, by talking about black power, which many a times is met with a lot of opposition. This specific video, it was titled Black Power of White Oppression. Let us watch this video together, and then once it's done, we will get back and do a critical analysis about the same.
We're going to talk about power not from the point of view of being victimized by it, but by developing it and using it against our enemies. At the last lecture I gave at the Slave Theater, where we were talking about global white supremacy, I initiated this theme on power by saying that we can explain the reasons Europeans victimize us in as many ways as we would like. We could talk about them as being ice people as against the sun people, and that explanation is valid. I have no problems with it. We can talk about them in terms of their protecting their more recessive genes against our more dominant genes. We can even get into a little psychoanalysis and deal with the myth of length of penises and penis envy and all the other things, and black balls and white balls and brown balls and black holes and white balls rolling into black holes and things of this nature. And all that's fine. That's a lot of fun. But no matter how you explain why or how the European got to the point of victimizing us, I think the essential issue is that the European victimizes us because he can, because he has the power to do so. And we are victimized because we haven't developed the power to prevent his doing so. So in a sense, no matter how we explain why he does what he does, at the end point, he does what he does because he can. And consequently then, I infer from this that we can end his victimization of us when we end his power to do so. And consequently, I want to bring into the domain of discussion in this community the subject matter of power. I want us, in addition to studying black history and culture, to study power, its accumulation, its use and application. We should talk about it every day and everywhere. We should read about it, and we should develop the means of using it. We should come to understand the nature of how white power is organized. In the end, power does not flow from the genes of white folk. Does that not flow from their ice age? It flows from the nature of their organization and the way they have chosen to relate one to the others. And it flows from their intentionality as a people and their appropriate organization of themselves to realize their intentionality, one of which is, of course, the domination of African people. And that means then that we as African people must study the rules of organization. We must study the means of relating one to each other in such a way that we multiply our power. And we must study our enemy's organization such that we can probe that organization and destroy the power of the enemy. And we can do it. We have a tremendous amount of power in our hands. Right here in America, we are not a weak people by any stretch of the imagination. The only weakness is in our minds and in our imaginations. That's the only place. We are not a dependent people in the material sense, only in the psychological sense. The only thing, ladies and gentlemen, we must get over is our cowardice. That's the only thing. That's the only thing. And we can change this. I will speak briefly then to the issue this evening relating to the message that Dr. Bregan brought you last week around this conference titled Genetic Factors in Crime, Findings, Uses, and Implications, which was to occur at the University of Maryland. I've warned you many times, and I've told you many times, I don't know whether it gets through to you or not, that we as black people must get over this thing of looking at schools and universities as advanced vocational training institutions. How many people recall that I've repeated this time and time again? That the function of education is not jobs. That is not the primary function. Children and people are educated. The primary function for education is to advance the interests of a people and to protect their interests, to secure their survival. That the educational structures and institutions of this country are as much a part of its defense, of its armed forces, as are its soldiers. The bombs, the weaponry that this nation uses against other nations and intimidates other nations with, develop out of the universities. The germ warfare, the chemical warfare, political, because some great professor is the head of this particular department, or they have illustrious names in the department, chances are you will never see them teach you in a class. The graduate students on some kind of assistantship will more likely be your teacher. Where are the brains and where are the professors? They're doing research. And often they're doing research on government grants for the government, for the corporations, for the other institutions in the society, and they are part of then the total system of domination of this country. Afrocentric education above all, and even beyond the teaching of African history and African culture, is preparing our children to defend the very lives of African people, is a military preparation and a preparation for war. It is the means by which we will maintain our biological survival as a people. For if you do not survive, what does it matter if you teach reading to 100% of our children, or they learn math well, or they learn computer science, or all the other things you think are important, when your very lives are in the balance, and it is very likely that they will be snuffed out in the next 10 to 20 years. And yet we still continue to look at schools and colleges and universities as vocational institutions. And here we have then at the University of Maryland, long connected with the U.S. Army, by the way, hosting a conference on so-called genetic factors in crime. Reagan charged that this meeting, which was canceled, was part of a broader program, a violence initiative, a federal government research agenda, so that this program was only a part of a larger agenda. And it was designed to move toward finding a genetic marker that would supposedly identify children at high risk of becoming criminals, and to develop plans to deter them through medication. And this is interesting due to the fact that there's little or no real information that links directly in any kind of strong way or even in a mild way a relationship between genes and criminality. There's been no DNA segment that has been discovered that codes for crime. When you think about it, the idea is ludicrous anyway. What is crime? What is violence? What is violence? In other words, I'm asking this question because you have to do a linguistic analysis. They are all forms of what? Violence. There are many different types of what? Crime. Different types of aggression. Not all violence is necessarily bad. There is what we in psychology may call hostile aggression. But there is aggression or violence that may be used in terms of what? Self-defense. Violence may be used to protect your children from attack. Violence may be used to protect the lives of other people. So now if we're going to get a gene for violence, for a type of violence, or in removing the gene for violence, if we were to find it, which is an unlikely situation, are we also removing a people's capacity to defend themselves and to use violence in their own interest? What I'm saying is then, be very careful when people use words like violence, aggression, crime, and so forth, and ask yourself, what kind of crime? You know, do we have a gene for every type of crime you can name? So that even when we change definitions of crime, a new gene comes into being that we're going to find related to that particular crime. And when we decide that certain other behavior is no longer a crime, will the gene which was coded for that crime disappear? Ludicrous. Ludicrous. I talk in Black on Black Violence about the structuration of crime. That crime follows, the type of violence that we talk about, or crime, even its nature, follows the class structure and follows the skills levels of criminals. You see? Why is there so much so-called violent crime in certain segments of the society? Because when you look at the skills levels of the people committing them, if they were to commit a crime, that's about the only crime they could commit. If they were accountants, they would commit the crime of embezzlement. and steal hundreds of thousands or millions because they have a particular ability or skill. And you'd be a fool if you were an accountant or in an S&L where you could steal millions of dollars and then make the public pay billions back and then hang out on the street and knock somebody out in the head. So here we have this crimogenic society that robs our people of skills and other means, so that if they decide to participate in a crime, then the probability is that it will be violent by the very nature of the way the society has set them up in the beginning. In other words, the society even determines the type of crime you are most likely to commit itself. Okay? And then it tells you, you're violent. Teach me to be an accountant. I won't hit any more people in the head. I'll just rob them by books. Okay? And then they want to talk about white-collar crime and, and the other kind of collar crime. Come on. Wake up. This has nothing to do with genes. It has to do with the nature. I've also told you about reversal, right? I mentioned the fact that in order for us as a people to be in the situation that we're in, we literally have to be turned backwards. We have to think backwards, behave backwardly, deal with the world backwardly. It's necessary. That's the only way the system can maintain itself. Sometimes I say the best way to win an argument is to concede to your opponent. Okay, there is a genetic marker for crime. Let's now look at the criminal record of African peoples and European peoples. The record is clear. If there is a genetic marker for crime, when we look at the fact that the European has committed a crime against every people on every continent and destroyed millions of people, then that argues for his genetic criminality. And that argues then for us to medicate him and control him. The other thing I'm surprised at is we keep being surprised. We keep thinking that this is some new initiative. The violence initiative began with our enslavement and continues today. We already have bought the violence initiative, ladies and gentlemen. It is already operating. We bought it when we bought learning disabilities, when we bought the concept of hyperactivity, when we bought the concept of impulsivity, when we bought the concept of special education. You're already in it. Connected to these so-called symptoms of learning disability are the very same symptoms they're going to try to connect to the so-called genetic markers. And our children are already being drugged. The violence initiative has already occurred because our youth are already going to jail in record numbers. So why are we talking about these people are initiating something to bring and put our youth in jail? They're already in jail. Those that are not already in jail are in juvenile detention, are under the aegis of the BCWs. You heard it tonight. In the special education program, already being drugged, already being therapized, already having their minds distorted in various ways. And the worst violence initiative program is the public educational system itself. So this so-called initiative that you're talking about tonight is a mopping up operation. That's all it is. If you're telling me in Washington, D.C. and other places, black youth and black people, 75% are in some form of contact with the criminal justice system already. Some 60% in any given day in Baltimore and other areas already in contact with the criminal justice system. Well, then what will this new initiative do? Just make it what? 100%. We should have already been what? Upset. Why are we kicking and screaming now? We should have been screaming already. This initiative is an old trick in psychiatry and psychology. It's a trick that we call the medicalization of social problems. That is to define a social and political problem as a medical problem, and to put psychiatrists who are doctors, physicians with MDs in control of the definition of these problems, even though they are an arm of the state, as are social workers, as are psychologists, as are all of the other helping professionals, but members of the state and arms of the state. But we are so willing to submit to their authority, such that when they define social and political behavior and behavior which has social and political causes in medical terms, even the oppressed and the victimized consent to their mistreatment. Louis Sullivan is a part of this, but in a sense we're all a part of it, because we buy the medicalization of issues. And they know, since we are willing to do anything the doctor tells us to do, why are you taking that poison? The doctor said take it every 2 hours. The doctor says. So now if the doctor says that your children have a marker, a genetic marker, then let's go with it. And we don't have time the evening, one of these days we'll talk about psychiatric power and the role of psychiatrists in the system. Oh, the history of psychiatrists are horrendous. You won't believe it. You won't believe the tortures that have been created in the name of psychiatry, that are even being perpetrated today. You won't believe the robbing of civil liberties, the robbing of freedom, and all other kinds of things, the complete destruction and taking away of people's constitutional rights in the name of psychiatry. When you medicalize a problem and define it in medical terms, the patient loses all rights. And therefore you can resolve a lot of issues that, if they were defined politically or socially, would then become constitutional and legal issues. But as soon as they are put under the aegis of medicine, then you reduce to a very great extent the legal and constitutional implications. So what we have going here then is an attempt to move social and political problems into the area of psychiatry, so that we, even as African people, can consent to social control and the killing of our people.
Family, anytime we talk about black power, the white supremacist has always felt threatened. Dr. Amos Wilson says we want to talk about power not from a point of being victimized, by it, but by developing it and using it against our enemies. Many times when we talk about power, the black folk has always been victimized. And now Dr. Amos Wilson says we want to talk about power not from a point of being victimized, but by it developing, using against our enemies. Us trying to develop it and use against our enemies. And no matter how you explain how the European got to a point of victimizing us, the essential issue is they victimized us because they can, because he has the power to do so. We've always been victimized because the Europeans have always had the power to do so. We have never gotten the opportunity to have the power. We are also victimized because we haven't developed the power to prevent them from doing so. We had no power to even say no to oppression, to say no to discrimination, to say no to racism. We have never had the power as a people. It proceeds to say, we can end this victimization of us when we end this power to do so. In addition of studying Black history and culture, we should study power. Dr. Amos Wilson tries to empower Black people and telling them it's high time that just we should try, and learn about Black power the same way we yearn to learn about our history as the Black folks. In addition of studying Black history and culture, we should study power. We should talk about it every day and everywhere. We should read about it and develop the means of using it. We should come to understand the nature of how white power is organized. We should get to understand about power. We should study it, get to learn about how white power has always been organized, to work against us, for them to always be the ruling class while we are their subjects. We as Blacks must study the means of relating amongst ourselves in such a way that we multiply our power, and we must study our enemy's organization such that we can destroy the power of the enemy. Once we've mastered, the enemy organization, we can easily destroy the power of the enemy. We have a lot of power in our hands. The only weakness is in our minds and imaginations. Our minds are limiting us. Our imaginations are limiting us as a people. The only thing we must get over is our cowardice. Family, enough is enough. We've been afraid for the longest time. It's time we get outside there, unite together, get away, of our cowardice and just say enough is enough. We want, to regain our position in the human race. We are nothing inferior. We are equals, It's time that we step up and say that enough is enough. I also went further to look at to do further research in regards to the topic by Dr. Amos Wilson on Black power. And here's what I found out. Some of the key ideas, in his phenomena. Number one is power is practical, not just symbolic. Power must be practical. Wilson argued that Black power wasn't just about having Black leaders or political representation. It doesn't have to be symbolic. True power came from economic control, self-sufficiency, and the ability to influence institutions that shape Black life. I remember when Obama first won in the first election, when he was the first Black president, in the United States of America. The whole world was in celebration, especially in Africa. We were celebrating so much. We thought that we were in a position of power, but rather but a symbolic position, not the real power. Then number two, we have the economic empowerment. Economic empowerment is key. He emphasized that Black people must own businesses, control industries, and build wealth instead of being consumers dependent on others. Without economic power, political and social power will be limited. There's a lot of strength, with the economy. You'd rather try and be empowered economically than be empowered socially or even politically. Then number three, education as a tool for liberation. Wilson believed that mainstream education often miseducates Black people. He advocated for an education system designed to produce leaders and thinkers who would uplift the Black community rather than just train people to work for others. Then number four, we have the psychological liberation. He stressed the importance of breaking free from mental slavery. Black people needed to redefine their self-image, reject inferiority complexes, and embrace their history and culture as sources of strength. Number five is power must be organized. Wilson warned against individualism and disorganization, stating that power only comes through collective action. He encouraged black communities to work together strategically to build institutions that serve their own interests. Number 6 is challenging white supremacy. He saw white supremacy as a system that black people needed to dismantle. We must dismantle this system known as white supremacy. Not just protest again. This requires strategic thinking, economic independence, and self-sustaining communities. Guys, let me know on the comment section down below what you think about the teachings of Dr. Amos Wilson. Myself, I found this video to be very, very educative. That's why I thought for me even to share it tonight. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for tuning to watch this video. Comment down below on the comment box and let me know what you think about the teachings of Dr. Amos Wilson. Guys, like this video so that it can be recommended to other YouTube users, and I'll be so grateful. Last but not least, kindly do consider subscribing to my channel. Currently, we are on the road to 50,000 subscribers and we cannot do it without your support, guys. Thank you and see you all in our next episode. Goodbye for now.